Greetings again, curious warriors of the blade, and welcome back to the archives. One of the most interesting phenomena in the Clone Wars timeline is the fact that Anakin Skywalker and General Grievous only ever met a single time during its entirety. During the Battle of Coruscant, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Chancellor Palpatine would be captured on the Invisible Hand shortly after their duel with Dooku. Here, Grievous and Anakin meet face to face for the very first time. Obi-Wan had met and dueled with General Grievous a number of times, in fact 6 times prior to this very meeting. However, Anakin himself, the one who has been stated as being the hero of the Clone Wars, never once crossed sabers with the villainous leader of the Separatist droid army. And unfortunately for us, he never would, as during the council meeting when the Masters were discussing who to send to Utapau to assassinate Grievous, they would ultimately veto the Chancellor's election of Anakin to face down the droid general, choosing instead to go with Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Jedi who had the most experience with the droid general thus far. However, we can't help but wonder what would happen if Anakin fought Grievous. Would he have what it took to best the four-armed Jedi Slayer? Well, in this holocron, we are going to take a look at both Anakin and Grievous' skill to determine what the outcome would be if the two of them ever met on the battlefield. In-universe, the reason Grievous and Anakin had not met prior to the very end of the Clone Wars was that Darth Sidious wanted to make sure that Grievous did not damage his prized future pupil. Palpatine knew that Anakin had great potential, and he could trust someone more restrained and skilled like Dooku to extract the dark side out of Anakin. Grievous, however, was more like a mad dog, one that Sidious could only choose to point at a target before letting him off the leash. Grievous couldn't be trusted to follow orders of Sidious to more niche specifications. Though Palpatine was confident in Anakin's power, he didn't want the boy to be tarnished too soon by the droid general. Not only that, but Palpatine was far more interested in getting Obi-Wan out of the picture, so he constantly designed it to where Grievous would run into Kenobi at every corner. Sidious was confident in knowing that Grievous was quite good at dispatching Jedi, which is what made it so frustrating that he couldn't get rid of Kenobi. However, as Anakin's power and skills grew over the course of the Clone Wars, so did Palpatine's opinion of him. Finally, the time had come to test the young Skywalker's true mettle with the duel on the Invisible Hand. Palpatine got to see Anakin go up against Dooku once on Naboo. However, he desired to see Anakin unleash his fury uninhibited by nearby Magna Guards, or his master. Thus, the setup for the duel on the ship was necessary. After watching Anakin use his fury to take out the aging Sith swordsman, Palpatine was quite confident that his future apprentice was ready to dispatch Grievous with hardly any difficulty. This was why he had elected Anakin to go on the mission to face down Grievous. Of course, though, it didn't matter to Palpatine how Grievous got destroyed, or if Anakin went on the mission or not. He had won either way. Anyway, so we already know why Obi-Wan managed to kill Grievous. Would Anakin have been able to do the same? And was Palpatine correct at the time in believing that Anakin was finally ready to face Grievous? The problem we have when asking this question of who Grievous can beat comes down to who knows better how to handle his many arms and his many tricks. Obi-Wan, as the master of Surisu, knew how to best the general by creating and implementing a barrier of defense and attacking his openings, essentially becoming impenetrable. Not to mention all the experience he had fighting Grievous the several times before that they faced off. Kit Fisto, a user of Shi-Cho Form 1, a form that was excellent at fighting off several opponents at once, thus giving him an advantage against Grievous that he needed. Neither Obi-Wan nor Fisto were afraid of Grievous, and they therefore could use the Force against him. As we all know, Anakin doesn't fear any of his enemies and would have no problem calling upon the Force in order to aid him. Concerning his lightsaber style, Anakin used Form 5 Gem So, and its variant Xian. Anakin's form focused on just about all-out attack with very little regard for defense, besides the quick parries and counters of the form. Gem So is very much a strength-based form that emphasizes gaining momentum and using savage, brutish attacks to batter an opponent's defenses until the point where they are nothing. Anakin later on would couple his use of Gem So with the footwork and movements of Ataru, nearly perfecting Form 5, making up for its weaknesses of a lack of proper movement. Using this, Anakin was basically unstoppable in a duel, and became regarded as one of the finest duelists the Jedi had ever seen, surpassing Obi-Wan and even Sindralig in terms of skill. Anakin considered himself to be on the level of Mace Windu, and even Yoda, but that remains to be seen, and was a highly controversial opinion. The Form 5 variant Xian is actually more of a defensive style that is geared more towards blaster deflection, and not much lightsaber combat at all, though it can be used in lightsaber combat, but not always very effectively. Knowing Anakin, he'd want to rush straight in against General Grievous during their engagement, similarly to how he attacked Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith. Here is where we have a little problem though, which is this: unlike all the other Jedi, Anakin and General Grievous are incredibly alike in terms of their fighting style and how they approach combat, so much so that I believe that the two would end up frustrating each other. Both use an overwhelming amount of offense. Both have a tendency to tunnel vision on their targets. Both have sneaky tricks that they like to use. And both do everything they can to batter their opponent down by sheer brute strength and fear. Never before would Grievous be up against someone that could match him blow for blow like Anakin Skywalker. And in my opinion, I believe that this would either enrage or frighten the droid general. Grievous might try to pull a cheap trick and try to escape, but by then, Anakin's fury would be too much for him to contain. There were many times when Anakin fought Dooku that he got himself whipped up into a frenzy, proving his dominant strength over the Sith. But Dooku would end up using Anakin's anger against him by striking a precise blow to off balance and then defeat the young Jedi. Grievous, on the other hand, just isn't as intelligent as Dooku and would only make things worse for himself by taunting and spewing insults at Anakin. Ultimately, we conclude that this would shake out to be something like a King of the Hill battle, with neither one able to out-dominate the other with their savage attacks. Unfortunately for our lightsaber-wielding cyborg though, Anakin isn't like most Jedi, and he simply does not get tired. Anakin would get angrier and angrier, feeding his power as he would start to become stronger. Suddenly, the tide would shift, and Grievous would lose one arm and then the other before being forced on the defense, something that the droid general is not very good at. Grievous might try to pull a cheap trick and escape here, but it's unlikely that he would get away from Anakin if we're being honest. The persistence of Anakin Skywalker is what makes the High Council worry about him. His unwillingness to give up and to always see a victory through would serve him very well here. In the end, General Grievous might have a lot of arms, but he's nowhere near the strength and power of the Chosen One. Anakin may not be able to overpower Grievous at first, but by using his Ataru footwork, he would outpace the general before building up his momentum and eventually striking him down. In the end, we believe that Anakin Skywalker would very much be a match for General Grievous, where at the time there were only ever a select few Jedi that were. In fact, Mace Windu himself was even afraid of facing down Grievous. But a duel between Anakin and Grievous would be exceedingly interesting. It would essentially be the story of an unstoppable force fighting an unstoppable force. Obi-Wan Kenobi was able to outmaneuver and defeat General Grievous because of his defense, but the exact opposite would be true for Anakin. I do not believe that Anakin's victory would be as swift or as easy as Obi-Wan's was, as Obi-Wan was allowed to analyze and learn from Grievous to the point where he grew empowered to the point where the duel wasn't really all that difficult for him. In the end though, I do believe the duel would be quite difficult for the Chosen One, perhaps one of the more difficult of his lifetime, but that is not to say that Anakin Skywalker wouldn't dominate Grievous in the end. As a small side note, the skill level and power of Grievous is something that is very difficult to pin down. Across his various depictions, from the comics to various novels to what we see in the Clone Wars, varies drastically, especially in terms of his skill with the lightsaber. At some points he's defeating multiple council members at once, and at other times Padawans like Ahsoka are keeping pace with him. So we want to make it clear that in this video we very much took the depiction of General Grievous from Revenge of the Sith and decided to place Anakin up against a much more deadly version of the droid general. But my friends, we want to know your honest thoughts here, and concerning a duel between Anakin Skywalker and General Grievous. This, along with a Anakin vs. Maul, are on the list of duels that many of us sorely wish we would get to see someday. Anakin is an incredible duelist, and actually, I believe he's underrated. But as a Jedi, we only ever really see him fighting Dooku and Ventress on the regular. There is of course Barriss Offee, but she's a Padawan and one that Anakin quickly put in place. But let us know what you think about this, and what other duels would you like to see for us to speculate upon. Until next time, my friends, Warriors of the Blade, may the Force be with you, and I hope to see you soon.